Hi everyone, we've assembled some random Disneyland tips to make your trip better. And the first tip deals with standby lines. We have experienced this a number of times at Disneyland, most notably at Space Mountain, where we got in line when there was a stated 35-minute wait. By the time we got done waiting, it was over 2 hours and 10 minutes. What we've noticed is the line will be moving pretty quick, and then all of a sudden it will grind to a halt where you may only move 5 to 10 feet every 5, 10, or 15 minutes. Our suggestion is if you're in a line that is moving pretty good and then it just grinds to a halt, and if you're not towards the front of the line, just get out of the line and find something else to do, because you're gonna be wasting a lot of time in that standby line.
And also getting really frustrated. Our next tip, and this is one that we have a hard time saying.
We're gonna eat some crow on this one.
Yeah, it's not our favorite thing to do, but it does make your trip a lot more enjoyable, is to buy Genie Plus if you're able to. Especially if this trip is one that you don't make very often, or you're only going for 1 day or 2 days. It will make your trip so much more enjoyable to buy the Genie Plus. Like we just said, the standby lines can be really crazy sometimes and just make your day so frustrating and long. And no one wants to feel like that when they're on vacation. So if you are able to afford the Genie Plus, we highly recommend it. We especially love that you also get the ride photos included with the Genie Plus, so you don't have to pay extra for those. But it just really makes your day a lot more enjoyable if you buy the Genie Plus. And it's hard for me to say that because I'm not a huge fan of Genie Plus, but it does help.
Continuing our tips with Genie Plus, if you have purchased a ticket that included Genie Plus for your party, you can only make Lightning Lane reservations once you have scanned into the park. For example, Crystal and myself, there's 4 of us. We have 2 teenagers, and sometimes the 2 of us get to the park before our teens do because they like to sleep in. Well, if we purchase Genie Plus for all 4 of us, only Crystal and myself can make reservations, and it's not until our boys can scan into the park, then they can start making reservations for the attractions they want to ride.
Also, if you did not buy Genie Plus beforehand, like for instance, we have a Magic Key and we can't buy it ahead of time, once you scan into the park, then you can purchase Genie Plus and make your first Lightning Lane selection, but you have to scan in first.
Yeah, so it's slightly different than Walt Disney World. So if you're used to the way Walt Disney World does things, it's a little bit different here.
This next tip is for breakfast. So if you're staying in a hotel that does not include a breakfast, our tip is, if you're rope drop people like we are, head to rope drop, do as much as you can during rope drop, and then what we like to do is head over to Earl of Sandwich, which right now at Downtown Disney is the closest location to the entrances of both Disneyland and California Adventure. And the reason we go to Earl of Sandwich is 1, it's really tasty, but 2, it's a really good deal for Disneyland food prices, especially for breakfast. You can get a breakfast sandwich for $5.99, or you can get one with meat for $6.50, and that's pretty darn cheap for Disneyland. And then we like to get that. Sometimes we'll also run down to Starbucks, grab a Starbucks, kind of eat our breakfast after we've done all the craziness of rope drop, and then we kind of take a little break, refresh, and go back into the park and start using our Genie.
Now, if you've seen one of our shorts, we made a rope drop fail short, and we were trying to rope drop Radiator Springs Racers in June, and we got to the park about 15 minutes before the park opened, and we were actually pretty far back. We didn't think we were as far back as we were until park opened. We raced to get down to Radiator Springs Racers. By the time we entered Cars Land, we were really far back, and our gut was telling us that this was going to be a very long wait. Well, our friends were a little bit ahead of us, and they ended up staying. We bailed from the line, and we went over to Guardians of the Galaxy. We rode Guardians of the Galaxy twice. We got breakfast at Earl of Sandwich. We went shopping. We rode Incredicoaster, and they were still waiting in line for Radiator Springs Racers. I believe they waited over 3 hours to get in line. If it's not looking good, we suggest to bail out on that line and just shift your plans a little bit. Be a little flexible with your rope drop plans because it may change like what we experienced. And the same thing applies for Rise of the Resistance. If you see that you're really far back, you are better off spending that first hour riding different attractions rather than waiting in a really long line for Rise of the Resistance. We tend to ride Rise of the Resistance around lunchtime to 1 o'clock, and we generally wait 45 to 60 minutes for it, so it's not too bad. Now, of course, your results may vary if you ride it about the same time, but we find that that's about a good time to get in line for that. Radiator Springs Racers is miserably long all day. If you don't want to pay for that individual lightning lane, which is $13 to $20, we suggest riding single rider if your party's okay with it. We were there a couple times with some friends that did not want to ride single rider, and both times we waited over 2.5 hours for Radiator Springs Racers, and it is a very long wait. It's painful. We have also created a short for this, and it's Mondays tend to be the busiest day of the week at the Disneyland Resort. So if you're staying for a number of days and you are planning a rest day, plan for it on Monday because that is really the busiest day now. We see it mentioned in forums, we see it everywhere where the crowds are just really busy. Sundays tend to be a little bit lighter, especially in the evening. A lot of the locals have to go to work on Monday, and so they leave the parks earlier, and we have been known to be at California Adventure after what looks like all the locals have left, and we have walked on Radiator Springs Racers, we've walked on Soarin', we walked on a lot of different attractions towards the end of the evening, and it just was a nice surprise for us.
Yeah, our last trip in June, after the fireworks, we checked the app and there was a 5-minute wait for Rise of the Resistance. We were at Big Thunder and we ran, and it was literally a walk-on. We walked all the way onto the attraction. It was fantastic.
When trip planning, we encourage you to look at the events calendar. Now, it doesn't always go out that far, but we see this happen a lot. People will go in October, they'll have a 1-day, 1-park ticket, and they'll book California Adventure and not realize there's an Oogie Boogie Bash party going on that day. And then they realize they have to be out of the park at 6 p.m. and it's a shock to them. It's happened to my dad. My dad doesn't listen to me. It comes as a shock and a surprise to a lot of people because their day is over because they do not have a park hopper ticket and they can't go over to Disneyland. So check that calendar as far in advance as possible. You can also search for historical parties, events that happen, just to kind of get an idea of what's going on at Disneyland. But always know September, October timeframe, there's always Oogie Boogie Bash parties, and they keep adding more and more to the schedule. So be flexible and plan ahead.
Along those same lines is to also check the calendar for the operating hours. I think a lot of people assume the parks are open really late every single day, and that's not the case, especially at the beginning of December. Usually on weekdays, the parks close earlier and they're only open late on Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights. So it's frustrating because I've seen so much frustration from people about it, and that's understandable. And another thing that's frustrating is Disneyland does not release those times super far in advance. So like Jim had mentioned, you might want to check the historical opening and closing hours around the dates that you're going until you can get the actual hours ahead of time before your trip. Just so you know ahead of time that, okay, that night the park's gonna close at 9, not at midnight.
We once filmed a video about which bathrooms to avoid at Disneyland. We never released it, but the one that you should avoid at all costs is New Orleans Square. That tends to be the most crowded bathroom and has the most unpleasant odors. Always has a line for the men's, always has a line for the women's. We suggest to go a little bit further down, take advantage of the larger bathroom at Hungry Bear. There's just a lot more availability at both the men's and women's restroom, and your wait will be a lot shorter there. One of the biggest gripes we hear about are dining reservations, and they are very difficult to get at the Disneyland Resort. Dining reservations are supposed to release 60 days out at 6 a.m. Pacific time, and we're hearing that they're being released at 3 a.m. or other random times throughout the day. and they're gobbled up quick. So if you're not paying attention, they're gone in an instant. One thing you can do is sign up for a service like Mouse Dining. They have free options where you get text messages or emails when dining reservations do open up. And we've used that mainly at Disney World. It is available for Disneyland, and we suggest getting that. Another option is, as it gets closer to your trip, a lot of people's plans change and they'll release dining reservations about a week out. We've been very lucky and we've always been able to find reservations for, say, Lamplight Lounge within a week out. Now that dining reservations can be canceled up to 2 hours ahead of time, you may be lucky if you keep refreshing while you're waiting in those standby lines. You refresh that app, you might be lucky to find dining reservations same day at the park.
So just keep trying and don't give up if you don't get the reservation you really want. If you're a Walt Disney World person and you're coming to Disneyland for the first time, unlike Disney World, where if you stay on site, you can book your dining for your whole length of trip at 60 days out, you cannot do that at Disneyland. If you're staying at one of the Disneyland Resort hotels, the Grand Californian, the Disneyland Hotel, or the Pixar Place Hotel, you cannot book your whole length of trip at the 60-day mark. You would have to get up every day and book your dining reservations. If you have a tip that you love to share for Disneyland, please put it in the comments. We'd love to read it.
If you found this video helpful, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps our channel out. And if you want to check out one of our hotel tours, click the link here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.